The silence that followed was absolute. My stepmother Diana's fork clattered onto her plate. My father's newspaper slipped from his fingers. Madison's mouth hung open mid-sentence about her Italian study abroad program. I stared at my phone in shock, equally stunned by what had just happened. My secretary Emma's professional voice had just filled our modest dining room. "Miss Thompson, I'm confirming your private jet for Tuesday's board meeting in Chicago. Should I book the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons as usual?" "Emma," I said carefully, my heart racing as 3 pairs of eyes bore into me. "I think there's been some confusion about my schedule." "Oh no." Emma sounded flustered, completely unlike her usual composed self. "I just received the email from the investors. They've specifically requested you present the quarterly projections in person. The board thought the private jet would be most efficient, given your packed schedule this week." My stepmother Diana was the first to break the stunned silence. "Private jet?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Board meeting? Rachel, what exactly do you do for work?" Before I answer that question, let me take you back to where this all started. My name is Rachel Thompson, and at 29 years old, I'm the CEO and founder of a tech company worth $40 million. But my family thinks I work as a low-level office assistant, struggling to make rent in my city apartment. When I decided to come home for my 30th birthday weekend, I expected the usual awkward small talk and maybe a store-bought cake. Instead, I walked into a conversation that would unravel everything I'd spent years hiding. Growing up in Millbrook, a quiet suburban town where the biggest excitement was the annual Harvest Festival, I learned early that I was always going to be second place in my own family. Our house was a modest 2-story, with white siding and blue trim, the kind of place where neighbors borrowed cups of sugar and everyone knew each other's business. My father, Marcus, a hard-working accountant with gentle eyes and thinning brown hair, had married Diana when I was 13, 2 years after my mother died in a car accident. Diana brought her daughter Madison into our lives like a golden child who could do no wrong. Where I was quiet and studious, Madison was bubbly and popular. Where I spent weekends reading or working on school projects, Madison was always at sleepovers or social events. And where I had to fight for every scrap of attention or acknowledgement, Madison seemed to receive love and praise simply for breathing. The pattern established itself quickly and never changed. When we moved into our blended family home, Madison got the bigger bedroom with the walk-in closet because she has more clothes and social obligations. I got the smaller room that faced the neighbor's air conditioning unit. When it came to extracurricular activities, Madison's cheerleading uniforms, camp fees, and competition travel expenses always took priority over my academic clubs or science camp applications. "Madison's social development is so important for her future," Diana would explain. "And Rachel is naturally more independent anyway." By the time I turned 16, I had learned that my wants and needs would always come second. My birthday that year was postponed because it conflicted with Madison's homecoming dance preparation. My graduation party was scaled down because Madison needed a new laptop for college. Every milestone in my life seemed to be overshadowed by whatever Madison had going on. The message was clear. Madison was the priority, and I was expected to understand and accommodate that without complaint. My father, bless his heart, tried to be fair, but he was often outnumbered by Diana's enthusiastic advocacy for Madison's needs. He would give me apologetic looks across the dinner table when yet another one of my events was canceled or minimized for Madison's benefit, but he rarely spoke up. "Rachel is so mature for her age," Diana would tell her friends at neighborhood barbecues. "She just gets it, you know. She doesn't need all the attention that some teenagers require." It was praise that felt like a punishment, recognition that hurt more than being ignored. The final straw came during my senior year of high school. I had worked tirelessly to earn a full scholarship to a prestigious university 3 states away. It was my ticket out, my chance to finally be somewhere I could shine without being compared to Madison's social successes. But when acceptance day came, Diana sat me down with a concerned expression. "Sweetheart, I know you're excited about this college opportunity, but have you considered how it might affect Madison? She's only a sophomore, and she really looks up to you. If you leave for college so far away, it might impact her emotional development during these crucial years." I stared at her, speechless. Even my academic achievements, my future, was somehow about Madison. "There's a perfectly good community college 20 minutes away," Diana continued. "You could live at home, save money, and be here to support Madison through her remaining high school years. Wouldn't that be the responsible choice?" That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the understanding one, the responsible one, the one who always accommodated everyone else's needs. I accepted the scholarship and left for college without looking back. But leaving physically was easier than leaving emotionally. Even 3 states away, I found myself making excuses for their behavior, minimizing my own hurt, and desperately seeking their approval whenever I came home for visits. Those visits became increasingly painful. Madison would regale everyone with stories of her college social life, her boyfriends, her spring break trips that Diana and my father eagerly funded. Meanwhile, my academic achievements, my growing success in tech internships, my acceptance into graduate programs, all received polite nods before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Madison's latest adventure. The pattern that started in childhood had followed me into adulthood, and I began to realize that nothing I accomplished would ever be enough to shift the family dynamic. I was still the reliable one, the independent one, the one who didn't need as much attention or celebration. So I stopped trying to get their attention and started building something they couldn't ignore. After graduating with a computer science degree and a burning determination to prove myself, I moved to Chicago with nothing but a used Honda Civic, 2 suitcases, and a dream that felt impossible. The city was overwhelming at first, skyscrapers that seemed to touch the clouds, streets bustling with people who all looked like they knew exactly where they were going, and rent prices that made my eyes water. My first apartment was a shoebox studio in a building where the elevator worked half the time, and the radiator sounded like it was possessed. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was 300 miles away from the suffocating dynamics of home. I landed an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company called Data Flow Solutions, where I spent my days writing code for inventory management systems and my nights learning everything I could about emerging technologies. While my coworkers went out for happy hour drinks, I stayed in my cramped apartment, teaching myself programming languages and studying market trends. During those first 2 years, I called home every Sunday out of obligation. The conversations followed the same predictable pattern. Diana would update me on Madison's college achievements. In excruciating detail, my father would ask a few surface-level questions about my little computer job, and then they'd rush off to attend to something more pressing, usually related to Madison's latest crisis or celebration. I never corrected their assumption that I was just another faceless employee in a corporate machine. Something inside me wanted to prove myself first, to build something so undeniable that even they would have to acknowledge it. The breakthrough came during my 3rd year at Dataflow. I had been working on streamlining their client data processing system when I realized there was a massive gap in the market for small businesses who couldn't afford enterprise-level software but desperately needed better data management tools. I spent months developing a prototype during my lunch breaks and weekends. The software was designed to be intuitive enough for small business owners to use without extensive training, but powerful enough to handle complex inventory tracking, customer relationship management, and financial reporting, all in one integrated platform. When I finally presented my idea to my supervisor, expecting maybe some encouragement to develop it further, he barely glanced at my presentation before dismissing it. Small businesses don't spend money on software, Thompson. They use spreadsheets and prayer. Focus on the projects that actually matter. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment and made the biggest decision of my life. I was going to quit my stable job and start my own company. I'll never forget calling my father to tell him I was leaving Dataflow. I didn't mention starting my own business. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I just said I was making a career change. "Are you sure that's wise, sweetheart?" His voice crackled through the phone. "In this economy, having a steady job is so important. Maybe you should think about this more carefully." In the background, I could hear Diana excitedly talking to someone about Madison's internship at a prestigious law firm. The contrast wasn't lost on me. "I'll be fine, Dad," I said, swallowing the hurt. "I always land on my feet, right?" Starting Streamline Sync, the name I chose from my data management company, was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I withdrew my entire savings account, which amounted to about $12,000, and moved to an even smaller apartment to cut expenses. For the first 6 months, I lived on ramen noodles and determination. I worked 18-hour days, writing code, designing user interfaces, and cold calling potential clients from a list I compiled from business directories. The rejection was brutal and constant. "We don't need fancy computer programs," was a phrase I heard at least 50 times a week. But slowly, gradually, I started finding clients who understood the value of what I was building. A small manufacturing company in the suburbs became my first paying customer, followed by a chain of local restaurants, then a boutique marketing agency. The real turning point came when Jennifer Martinez, a successful entrepreneur who ran a network of fitness studios, not only bought my software, but asked if she could invest in the company. She saw the potential for expansion and offered to fund my growth in exchange for a 20% stake. That investment changed everything. Suddenly, I had the capital to hire my first employee, Emma, a recent business school graduate who became my assistant, project manager, and eventually, my closest confidant. She was the first person who knew the full extent of my complicated relationship with my family. "Wait, let me understand this correctly," Emma said after overhearing one of my painful Sunday phone calls with home. "Your family thinks you're struggling to make ends meet as a low-level tech support person, but you're actually running a company that just signed a $500,000 contract?" I shrugged, focusing on my computer screen rather than meeting her incredulous stare. They never asked for details. When they bothered to ask about work at all, they seemed satisfied when I said things were going okay before launching into updates about Madison's achievements. Emma shook her head in disbelief. "Rachel, you realize how crazy this sounds, right? You're literally hiding your success from the people who should be celebrating it with you." But that was the thing. I wasn't sure they would celebrate it. Years of being overlooked had conditioned me to expect disappointment. It felt safer to exceed expectations privately than to risk having my achievements minimized or dismissed. As Streamline Sync grew, the success became harder to hide, but my family's disinterest made it surprisingly easy. Our quarterly revenue reached 7 figures. We moved from my cramped home office to a sleek downtown space with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. I hired a team of 12 talented developers and designers. When business magazines started featuring articles about rising female entrepreneurs and Streamline Sync was mentioned as an innovative disruptor in the data management space, I found myself holding my breath, wondering if anyone from home would notice. They didn't. The disconnect between my two worlds became almost surreal. At work, I led board meetings with investors, made strategic decisions that affected dozens of employees, and traveled to conferences where industry leaders sought my insights. At home during holiday visits, I was still just Rachel, the quiet one who did something with computers and could always be counted on to understand when her needs came last. Last Christmas was particularly painful. I had just closed the biggest deal in Streamline Sync's history, a contract with a major retail chain that would triple our revenue over the next 2 years. I was flying high with excitement and wanted to share the news with someone who mattered to me. But when I arrived home, the house was decorated entirely around Madison's engagement announcement. She had gotten engaged to her college boyfriend, and Diana had transformed our living room into what looked like a bridal magazine explosion. There were engagement photos on every surface, wedding planning magazines scattered across the coffee table, and a timeline of upcoming wedding events taped to the refrigerator. "Isn't it exciting?" Diana gushed as she pulled me into the chaos. "Madison and Trevor are planning a destination wedding in Costa Rica. We're all going to be in the wedding party. And there's going to be a week-long celebration with all their college friends." My father beamed with pride as he showed me the expensive wedding venue photos on his tablet. "We're so lucky to be able to help them create their dream wedding," he said. "This is what family is all about, supporting each other through life's big moments." I spent that entire visit listening to wedding plans, being asked to help with logistics, and watching my family pour their energy, attention, and financial resources into Madison's fairy tale moment. When someone finally asked about my life, it was a perfunctory, "How's work, dear?" before immediately returning to discussions about flower arrangements and guest lists. I flew back to Chicago that week with a heavy heart and a renewed determination. If my family couldn't see my worth, couldn't make space for my successes, then I would build something so undeniable that eventually, even they would have to acknowledge it. That resolve led to the most aggressive expansion period in Streamline Sync's history. We acquired 2 smaller competitors, launched an AI-powered analytics feature that revolutionized our platform, and expanded into international markets. By my 29th birthday, Streamline Sync was valued at over $40 million, employed 68 people across 3 offices, and had been featured on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine. Emma had become my executive assistant by then, managing my increasingly complex schedule and serving as a buffer between my public success and my private struggles. She was also the only person who knew that every generous, anonymous donation that appeared in my family's lives, my father's surprise bonus that paid for roof repairs, Diana's mysterious contest win that funded Madison's graduate school tuition, the community grant that covered Madison's elaborate engagement party, all came from me. "You realize you've spent more on your stepsister's wedding than most people make in 5 years," Emma pointed out after I authorized another transfer to cover Madison's dress alterations and bridal party expenses. "They can't afford it," I said defensively, "and it makes them happy. But they don't even know it's coming from you. You're literally funding your own exclusion from their priorities." Emma's words stung because they were true. I was enabling the same pattern that had hurt me for years, but I couldn't seem to stop. Some part of me still desperately wanted their approval, their love, their recognition. And if I couldn't get it through my achievements, maybe I could earn it through my generosity. But as my 30th birthday approached, I found myself staring at my reflection in my corner office window and wondering what would happen if they actually knew the truth. What if, just once, I let them see who I really was? The decision to go home for my 30th birthday was impulsive and probably masochistic. I was sitting in my downtown Chicago office, looking out at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, when Emma knocked on my door with my usual afternoon coffee. "Your father called the main line," she said, setting down the steaming mug. "Apparently, he couldn't reach your personal phone." I glanced at my cell phone, which I had unconsciously placed face down on my desk after seeing 3 missed calls from home. What did he want? "He wanted to make sure you knew that Madison's engagement party is next weekend. He seemed concerned that you might have forgotten and made other plans." The irony wasn't lost on me. My family never remembered my birthday without Facebook reminders, but they assumed I had nothing better to do than attend Madison's pre-wedding celebrations. "Did you tell him I was in meetings?" I asked. Emma gave me one of her knowing looks. "I told him you were reviewing acquisition proposals with the board, which is technically true, since those documents are on your desk." But Rachel, he had no idea what that meant. He asked if you were still working at that computer place. Lie. Something about that conversation triggered a strange impulse in me. Maybe it was turning 30. Maybe it was the realization that another milestone was passing without acknowledgement from the people who were supposed to matter most. Or maybe I was just tired of living a double life. Clear my schedule for next weekend, I said suddenly. I'm going home for my birthday. Emma's eyebrows shot up. Are you planning to tell them about Streamline Sync? I don't know, I admitted. But I need to see if anything has changed. If there's any possibility of them actually seeing me. She looked skeptical but nodded. Should I arrange for the corporate car to drive you, or would you prefer to fly commercial? I'll drive myself, I said. I need time to think. The 5-hour drive from Chicago to Millbrook gave me plenty of time to rehearse different scenarios in my head. Would they notice the subtle changes success had brought? The confidence in my posture? The quality of my simple but expensive clothes? The absence of the financial stress lines that used to crease my forehead? I deliberately chose to drive my personal car, a modest Subaru rather than the Tesla I usually drove for business, wanting to ease into any revelations rather than announce them dramatically. Millbrook looked exactly the same as I pulled into the familiar driveway. The white house with blue shutters seemed smaller than I remembered, the garden Diana meticulously maintained looking picture-perfect as always. Before I could even turn off the engine, the front door opened and Diana appeared, her face lighting up with what looked like genuine pleasure. "Rachel," she called out, hurrying down the front steps. "You made it." I was starting to worry about the traffic. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of her signature vanilla perfume, and for a moment, I let myself hope that maybe things really had changed. "Let me look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length with the practiced eye of someone who had been evaluating appearances for decades. "City life is treating you well. You look polished." My father appeared behind her, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his smile warm and familiar. "There's my girl," he said, giving me one of his awkward side hugs. "How was the drive?" "Not bad," I said, grabbing my overnight bag from the car. "Traffic wasn't too terrible." "Well, come in," Diana said, ushering me toward the house. "Madison should be home from her yoga class soon. She's been so excited to see you." The house was exactly as I remembered. The same furniture, the same family photos on the mantel, the same sense of being frozen in time. But there were new additions that immediately caught my eye. A large vision board covered with Italian travel brochures, restaurant photos, and scenic landscapes pinned to the kitchen corkboard. "Madison's study abroad research," Diana explained when she noticed me looking. "She's finally decided on Florence for her master's program. The art history department there is supposed to be phenomenal." I nodded, unsurprised that Madison had found yet another expensive adventure to pursue. "That sounds amazing." "The program fees are substantial," my father said from the kitchen table, where he was reviewing what looked like financial documents. "But it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Madison's professor wrote her a glowing recommendation letter. "We're so proud of her for getting accepted," Diana added, her voice practically glowing with maternal pride. "It's such a competitive program." I helped Diana prepare dinner, falling into our old rhythm of her directing while I assisted with the mundane tasks. As I chopped vegetables, she filled me in on neighborhood gossip, church activities, and updates on Madison's various accomplishments. "The yoga studio where Madison teaches just offered her a leadership role," Diana said proudly. "They want her to develop their new mindfulness program. She has such a gift for connecting with people." "That's wonderful," I said, wondering if Diana knew that I had just been invited to keynote the Midwest Technology Innovation Conference, where I would be speaking to an audience of over 2,000 industry leaders. My father occasionally glanced up from his papers with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was something different about the way he was looking at me, as if he was trying to figure something out. "How's the job situation, kiddo?" he finally asked during a lull in Diana's monologue. "Still at the same place?" It was my standard opening to share something real about my life, but years of habit held me back. "Still in tech," I said vaguely. "Things are going well. Making enough to get by in that expensive city?" he pressed, which was unusual for him. Before I could answer, the front door burst open and Madison's voice filled the house. "I'm home. Where's the birthday girl?" Madison bounded into the kitchen like a whirlwind of blonde hair and athletic energy. At 26, she looked like she could have stepped out of a fitness magazine, her yoga-toned body perfectly showcased in expensive athleisure wear. "Rachel!" she squealed, embracing me with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "You look incredible. I swear Chicago has some kind of magic glow effect on you." Dinner was lively, dominated by Madison's animated stories about her yoga classes, her recent hiking expedition to Colorado, and most importantly, her upcoming adventure in Florence. "I've been manifesting this opportunity for months," she explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "A full year studying Renaissance art in the birthplace of the Renaissance. It's going to be absolutely life-changing." "Madison has been saving up," Diana added, though her quick glance at my father suggested otherwise. "Well, trying to save," Madison amended with a laugh. "Yoga instruction pays the bills but doesn't exactly fund international adventures. Mom and Dad are helping with the program fees." My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Actually, Rachel, that's something we need to discuss with you." My heart started to sink before he even continued. "We had originally planned to take you to Marcello's for your birthday dinner tomorrow," he said, referring to the nicest Italian restaurant in town. "We made reservations weeks ago." I felt a flicker of warmth. They had actually planned something for my birthday. "But we had to cancel the reservation," Diana continued, her voice apologetic but matter-of-fact. "The program deposit for Madison's Florence semester is due Monday, and the exchange rate has been fluctuating. We need to put that dinner money toward her tuition before the rates get worse." The familiar cold weight settled in my chest. "I see. We thought we could do something simple instead," my father added quickly. "Maybe order pizza and watch a movie at home." Madison had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I told them we could postpone the Italy program, but the professors said this cohort might be the last one they offer for several years. It's now or never for me." Diana nodded vigorously. "Exactly. You understand, don't you, Rachel? You have your stable job and your independent life, but Madison is at such a crucial point in her academic journey. This could really set up her entire career in art history." I looked around the table at their expectant faces. Diana's practical concern, my father's obvious discomfort, Madison's barely contained excitement about her opportunity. After all these years, nothing had changed. I was still the responsible one, expected to understand, to step aside, to need less. "Of course," I heard myself say, the words automatic after decades of practice. "Pizza sounds perfect." Relief visibly washed over my parents' faces. Diana immediately launched into an explanation of which pizzeria had the best gluten-free options for Madison's dietary restrictions, while my father retreated behind his newspaper. Just like that, my 30th birthday was downgraded and dismissed. I sat quietly for the rest of dinner, pushing food around my plate and fighting the urge to mention that I could buy the entire restaurant chain if I wanted to, let alone afford a birthday dinner. But some stubborn part of me still wanted them to value me without knowing about my success, to see Rachel the daughter, not Rachel the millionaire CEO. As Madison detailed every planned stop on her Florence itinerary, I found myself wondering why I had come home at all. Some naive part of me had hoped that turning 30 might be different, that maybe my family would finally prioritize me for once. But here I was, 29 years old, accomplished beyond my wildest teenage dreams, and still invisible at my own family's dinner table. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom with its faded pink wallpaper and dusty trophies from high school academic competitions, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what it would take for them to actually see me. The business magazines featuring my company were probably sitting unread in waiting rooms across the country. The tech industry awards I had won were displayed in my Chicago office, unseen by the people whose approval I still craved. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the dozens of birthday messages from my employees, business partners, and industry contacts. Emma had sent a photo of the elaborate cake waiting in my office back in Chicago, along with the message, "We miss our fearless leader. Say the word and I'll send a helicopter to extract you from family drama." The contrast between my two worlds had never felt so stark. In Chicago, I was respected, valued, even admired. Here in Millbrook, I was still just Rachel, reliable, understanding Rachel, who could always be counted on to accept whatever crumbs of attention were left after Madison's needs were met. But as I drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that tomorrow would bring the phone call that would finally shatter the carefully constructed wall between my two lives. The next morning brought no improvement in the family dynamic. I woke up to the sound of Diana and Madison excitedly planning shopping trips for Italy essentials, their voices carrying down the hallway like a soundtrack to my continued invisibility. When I made it to the kitchen, I discovered that Diana had forgotten to buy the coffee I could drink. She only remembered that Madison preferred herbal tea. So I walked to the local coffee shop, needing caffeine and a few minutes away from the house where my birthday was already an afterthought. When I returned with my large coffee and a box of pastries for everyone, the house was buzzing with activity, but none of it related to my birthday. Diana was helping Madison organize travel documents, while my father researched Italian voltage converters on his laptop. "Rachel, sweetheart," Diana said without looking up from Madison's passport application, "would you mind picking up groceries for tonight? I just can't step away from this paperwork right now. The program coordinator needs all these forms submitted by Monday." I agreed, swallowing my disappointment. Even on my birthday, I was primarily useful for errands. As I drove to the grocery store in my rented Subaru, I checked my phone to find dozens of birthday messages from my team and business contacts. Emma had sent a video of the entire Streamline Sync staff singing happy birthday in our conference room, along with a message. "The cake is waiting, but we can't celebrate properly without our fearless leader. How's the family reunion going?" I typed back, about as expected, "See you Monday." But Emma, being Emma, called me immediately. "That bad, huh?" she said without preamble. "They canceled my birthday dinner to fund Madison's study abroad program," I said, pulling into the grocery store parking lot but not getting out of the car yet. "Of course they did. Let me guess. You said you understood?" What else was I supposed to say? How about, "Actually, I can afford to pay for both the dinner and Madison's entire program without checking my bank balance," Emma suggested dryly. "Emma, I know. You want them to love you for who you are, not what you have. But Rachel, at what point do you stop enabling their blindness?" That evening, we sat around the dining room table with pizza boxes and paper plates, a far cry from the elegant birthday dinners Madison had always received. My father had picked up a grocery store cake that had "Happy Birthday, Rachel" written in slightly smudged blue frosting. "So Rachel," my father said as we ate, "tell us more about this computer job of yours. Are you still at the same company?" The question hung in the air like an opportunity. This was my chance to finally tell them the truth, to share the success I had built from nothing. But something held me back. Maybe pride, maybe fear, maybe just habit. "Still in tech," I said vaguely. "Things are going well." "That's nice, dear." Diana said absently, then immediately turned to Madison. Now, about your housing arrangement in Florence. Madison launched into another detailed account of her study abroad plans, describing the apartment she'd share with 2 other American students, the art museums she planned to visit, and the weekend trips to other Italian cities she hoped to take. I'm thinking of starting a travel blog, Madison announced. Maybe document my artistic journey through Italy. It could be the beginning of my personal brand as an art historian. What a wonderful idea, Diana exclaimed. You've always been so creative and photogenic. My father nodded approvingly. Our Madison, the entrepreneur. I nearly choked on my pizza. Here I was, an actual entrepreneur who had built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch, listening to them praise Madison for considering a travel blog. Didn't you do something with websites once? Diana asked me, her brow furrowed in vague recollection. Before I could answer, my phone rang. The screen showed Emma Urgent, which was her code for calls I absolutely needed to take, regardless of the circumstances. Under normal circumstances, I would have excused myself to take the call privately, but Diana waved her hand dismissively. Go ahead and answer, dear, she said with a condescending smile. We know your little office probably needs you even on your birthday. Something about her tone, that casual dismissal, the assumption that my work was unimportant enough to interrupt, made me snap. Instead of stepping away, I put the phone on speaker. Hello? I said, my heart already racing with a premonition that this moment was about to change everything. Emma's crisp, professional voice filled the dining room like a bomb going off. Miss Thompson, I'm so sorry to disturb your family celebration, but I need to confirm some details for next week. The private jet is scheduled for 7 a.m. Tuesday for your board meeting in New York. Should I book the usual penthouse suite at the Plaza, or would you prefer the St. Regis this time? The silence that followed was absolute. My father's pizza slice slipped from his fingers and landed cheese side down on his plate. Diana froze with her water glass halfway to her lips. Madison's mouth fell open mid-sentence. I stared at my phone, equally shocked. Emma and I had no New York meetings scheduled, and while Streamline Sync occasionally chartered private flights for crucial business, I had never heard anything about this particular trip. Emma, I said carefully, my voice barely steady. I think there might be some confusion about my schedule. Oh no. Emma sounded genuinely flustered, completely unlike her usual composed self. I just received the urgent email from the Goldman Sachs team. They're requesting an emergency meeting about the acquisition proposal. The board felt that chartering the jet would be most efficient given the time-sensitive nature of the deal. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in complete shock. I took a deep breath, recognizing that the moment of truth had arrived in the most unexpected way possible. Please tell them I'll need to review the acquisition terms before confirming. I managed, trying to maintain some semblance of professional composure, despite my racing heart. And Emma, let's discuss the travel arrangements tomorrow morning. Of course, Miss Thompson. Again, my apologies for the interruption. Happy birthday, boss. As I ended the call, the dining room remained frozen in a tableau of disbelief. My father was the first to break the silence. Private jet? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Boss? Diana echoed, looking like she'd seen a ghost. Acquisition proposal? Madison added weakly. I looked at their stunned faces and realized there was no going back. The carefully constructed wall between my 2 lives had just been demolished by a single phone call. I've been meaning to tell you all something about my work, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What exactly do you do? My father asked, his tone sharp in a way I'd rarely heard before. His newspaper lay forgotten beside his plate. I took a deep breath. This wasn't how I had imagined revealing my success. But perhaps there was never going to be a perfect moment. I'm the founder and CEO of Streamline Sync, I said. We develop data management software for small and medium-sized businesses. Diana's forehead creased in confusion. But you told us you worked at a tech company in an office. I do work at a tech company in an office, I said carefully. But I don't work for someone else. I own the company. I built it from nothing 7 years ago. Madison let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Wait, you own a company that has private jets? We don't own jets, I clarified. We charter them when necessary for critical business meetings. But yes, Streamline Sync is a significant player in the business software industry. We currently serve over 1,500 companies across the country, and we're expanding internationally. My father leaned forward, his engineering mind clearly trying to process the practical details. How many employees do you have? 68 as of last month, I said. We'll probably add another 20 after the Goldman Sachs deal is finalized. And you're the boss? Diana said slowly, as if testing the concept. The actual boss of all those people? I nodded, watching as realization dawned on their faces like a slow sunrise. The expressions shifted from confusion to something more complex. A mixture of pride, embarrassment, and perhaps a hint of defensiveness. Why didn't you tell us? Diana asked, and there was an edge to her voice that suggested I had somehow deceived them. When would I have told you? I asked quietly. Our phone calls last 15 minutes at most, and they're usually spent discussing Madison's latest achievements. You've never really asked about my work beyond whether I still had the same job. My father flinched slightly at this, his eyes dropping to the table. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We always ask how work is going, Diana protested. You always say, fine, or busy but good. How are we supposed to know you are running some major corporation? Streamline Sync was featured in Business Weekly last month, I said, unable to keep a hint of hurt from my voice. Our software platform won the National Innovation Award for Business Solutions. If any of you had ever Googled my name, you would have found dozens of articles and interviews. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. My father looked genuinely stricken. We had no idea, Rachel, he said quietly. That's the point, Dad, I replied. You never thought to look. You never imagined I could be doing anything noteworthy. And that's when the real conversation finally began. Diana's chin lifted defensively, her maternal instincts kicking in even as the ground shifted beneath her assumptions. That's not fair, Rachel, she said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I remembered from childhood arguments. We've always been supportive of your career. Have you? I challenged, my voice remaining calm but firm. When was the last time any of you asked me a specific question about my work? When Madison decided to pursue art history, you researched every program in the country. You know the names of her professors, her favorite artists, her thesis topic. Do you know what Streamline Sync actually does? Do you know the name of even one of my employees? Diana opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, her expression conflicted. Madison, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the phone call, suddenly spoke up. So you're like, rich now? There was an accusation in her tone that caught me off guard. Is that what this is about? You came home to show off how successful you are compared to the rest of us? Her words stung because they missed the point so completely. No, Madison, I said, meeting her eyes directly. I came home hoping to reconnect with my family. I deliberately downplayed my success because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not what I've achieved. But now you're throwing it in our faces, she continued, her voice rising, making us feel terrible about canceling a dinner reservation when apparently you could buy the whole restaurant. I didn't plan for Emma to call, I said, keeping my voice level despite the hurt building in my chest. But yes, it does hurt that after all these years, my birthday is still the first thing to be sacrificed. It hurts that you all assumed I would understand and accept it without question because that's what I've always done. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Rachel, we never meant to make you feel less important. We just thought. You thought Madison needed the support more. I finished for him. You've always thought that. And maybe that was true when we were kids, but I'm 30 years old today, and you still treat me like my feelings and milestones matter less than hers. The truth of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Diana's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were from guilt or frustration. We are proud of you, Rachel, she said, her voice wavering. We've always been proud of how responsible and independent you are. That's exactly the problem, I said, and I could hear years of suppressed pain creeping into my voice. You're proud that I don't need you, that I never cause problems or make demands. You celebrate my absence more than my presence. Madison pushed back from the table abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous, she said, standing up. You disappear to Chicago, barely keep in touch, hide your entire life from us, and then blame us for not knowing about it. Maybe, if you had shared anything real about yourself over the past decade, we would know you better. There was enough truth in her words to make me pause. Had I withdrawn too completely? Had my hurt led me to build walls too high for my family to scale? You're right, I acknowledged, surprising her. I did stop trying to be seen a long time ago, but that doesn't change the fact that you were all quick to cancel my birthday plans for your Italy trip without a second thought. That pattern has been consistent my entire life. It's not just about money, my father said quietly, and something in his tone made us all turn to look at him. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. I nodded, bracing myself. How long have you been helping us financially? The question caught me completely off guard. What do you mean? The anonymous donations, he continued, his engineer's mind clearly working through the pieces. My bonus last year that conveniently covered the roof repairs. Diana's contest win that paid for Madison's graduate school application fees. The mysterious grant that funded Madison's engagement party. That was all you, wasn't it? I stared at him, speechless. I had been so careful to make everything look legitimate, working through Emma to create paper trails that couldn't be traced back to me. How did you know? I asked weakly. I didn't until tonight, he admitted. But the timing was always too convenient. And now, knowing what I know about your company, he trailed off, shaking his head. Rachel, how much money have you spent on us without telling us? I looked around the table at their expectant faces and realized there was no point in lying anymore. Including Madison's engagement party, her graduate school tuition, the roof, the car repairs, Diana's medical bills from last year that insurance didn't cover. I calculated quickly. Probably around $150,000 over the past 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison sank back into her chair, her face pale. Oh my God, Diana whispered. Rachel, why? Because I wanted to help, I said simply. Because I love you all, even when you make me feel invisible. Because I could afford it, and you couldn't. But you let us treat you like... Madison's voice broke. Like you were the poor relative who should be grateful for pizza on her birthday. I enabled it, I admitted. I know that now. I was so desperate for your approval that I funded my own exclusion from your priorities. My father stood up abruptly and began pacing the small dining room. This is all wrong, he muttered. This is all so wrong. He stopped and turned to face me, his face etched with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shame and determination. Rachel, I owe you an apology, many apologies actually. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted. Please let me say this. He sat back down and leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. When Diana and I got married, we were trying so hard to blend our families that we lost sight of what was fair. You were this incredibly capable, independent kid who never seemed to need as much attention as Madison. Madison was, demanding isn't the right word, but she required more emotional support, more reassurance. Diana nodded, tears flowing freely now. She was so insecure after the divorce from her father. She needed constant validation. And you, my father continued, looking directly at me, you were so self-sufficient. You got good grades without being asked. You never got in trouble. You worked part-time jobs and saved money for college. We fell into the trap of thinking that because you could handle things on your own, you wanted to handle things on your own. Being self-sufficient wasn't always a choice, I said quietly. I know that now, he replied, his voice heavy with regret. We trained you to expect less from us, and then we took advantage of that. We turned your strength into an excuse for our neglect. Diana wiped her eyes with her napkin. I always thought you were the strong one, she said. The one who could handle anything. Madison needed so much support, so much encouragement. You seemed so sure of yourself, so capable. I was faking it most of the time. I confessed. I just learned early that showing vulnerability or disappointment didn't get me very far in this family. Diana's face crumpled. Rachel, I never wanted you to feel that way. Madison, who had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding, suddenly spoke up. I should have said something, she said, her voice small. All those times when your stuff got canceled for my stuff, I knew it wasn't fair, but I liked being the priority. I liked being the one who mattered most. Her honesty was brutal but necessary. And I should have spoken up for myself, I said, instead of building resentment and withdrawing from all of you. My father reached across the table and took my hand. Rachel, I want you to know something. I'm not just proud of what you've accomplished professionally. I'm proud of who you are. Your integrity, your generosity, the way you built something meaningful instead of just chasing money. Even if you had never founded Streamline Sync, you would still be extraordinary to me. His words, so long awaited, broke something open in my chest. Tears I'd been holding back for years finally started to fall. But the fact remains, I said through my tears, that it took a accidental phone call for any of you to see me clearly. If Emma hadn't made that mistake, I would have spent another birthday being the understanding one, while Madison got the attention and resources. The truth of that statement settled over all of us like a heavy blanket. We sat in the wreckage of years of miscommunication and missed opportunities, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in decades. So where do we go from here? Madison asked softly. It was a question none of us were quite ready to answer. The question hung in the air between us like a bridge we weren't sure we were ready to cross. Madison's words, so where do we go from here, felt both hopeful and terrifying. I excused myself to get some fresh air, stepping out onto the back porch where I had spent countless childhood evenings reading, while Madison played with friends in the yard. The night was cool, and I wrapped my arms around myself as I tried to process everything that had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. How did the family dinner go? Please tell me someone remembered it was your birthday. I stared at the message, unsure how to even begin explaining what had transpired. Finally, I typed back, the secret's out, we'll call you tomorrow with details. Her response was immediate. Finally. About time. Are you okay? I think so, I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure. The back door opened behind me, and I turned to see my father stepping onto the porch. He looked older than I remembered, the weight of our conversation seeming to have aged him in the span of an hour. Mind if I join you? He asked. I gestured to the porch swing where we had sat together many times when I was younger. before the family dynamics became so complicated. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of Diana and Madison cleaning up inside, their voices lower than usual, subdued by the gravity of what had been revealed. "I've been thinking about what you said," my father finally spoke. "About us never asking specific questions about your work, never looking you up online." I waited, not sure where he was going with this. "The truth is, I think we were intimidated by your success, even when we didn't fully understand what it was." "What do you mean?" He sighed, running his hands through his graying hair. "Even when you were in high school, you were operating on a different level than the rest of us. Your grades, your college applications, your scholarship interviews, you handled everything with this competence that made us feel unnecessary." "I didn't have a choice," I said quietly. "No one else was going to handle those things for me." "I know that now," he replied. "But at the time, Diana and I told ourselves that you preferred being independent. It was easier than admitting we were giving you less attention than you deserved." He turned to face me directly. "When you moved to Chicago and started talking about your tech job, part of me was afraid to ask too many questions because I suspected you were doing better than you let on. And if that were true, then we'd have to face the fact that we'd failed you." His honesty was painful but necessary. "Dad, you didn't fail me entirely," I said. "You taught me to be self-reliant, to work hard, to not give up. Those qualities helped me build Streamline Sync. But we also taught you that your achievements didn't matter as much as Madison's," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "And that's unforgivable." Before I could respond, Madison appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. "Can I talk to you?" she asked me. "Privately?" My father gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze and headed back inside, leaving Madison and me alone on the porch. She sat down where he had been, pulling her knees up to her chest in a gesture that reminded me of when we were kids. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and it's going to make me sound like a terrible person." I waited, unsure what to expect. "I knew," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Not about your company specifically, but I knew you were doing better than you let on. The way you dressed when you visited, the fact that you never seemed stressed about money, little comments you'd make about traveling for work." My stomach dropped. "Madison." "And I didn't say anything because I liked being the one who needed help," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I liked being the center of attention, the one who got all the support and encouragement. Even when I could see that it hurt you, I didn't want to give that up." Her confession hit me, like a physical blow. All these years, I had told myself that my family simply didn't see me clearly, that they were blind to the inequality. But Madison had seen it and chosen to maintain it. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "Because I can't live with the guilt anymore," she said. "Watching you sit there tonight, seeing how much we've hurt you. Rachel, you've been paying for my entire life for the past 3 years, and I've been treating you like an afterthought." She wiped her nose with her sleeve, looking younger than her 26 years. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she continued, "but I want you to know that I see you now. I see how incredible you are, how much you've accomplished, how generous you've been, despite having every reason to hate us." I stared at her, processing her words. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to minimize her guilt the way I always had. But another part of me, the part that had been building walls and keeping secrets, was angry. "You're right," I said finally. "You don't deserve my forgiveness. Not yet." She flinched as if I had slapped her, but I continued. "Madison, you're 26 years old. You've had a college education that I helped pay for, opportunities that were handed to you, and a family who centered your needs above everyone else's. And instead of using those advantages to build something meaningful, You've drifted from one interest to another while expecting everyone else to fund your journey of self-discovery. My words were harsh but true, and we both knew it. I know, she whispered. I know I've been selfish and entitled and… It's not just about being selfish, I interrupted. It's about the fact that you saw me being hurt and chose to look away because it benefited you. That's not selfishness. That's cruelty. The word hung between us like a slap. Madison sobbed quietly, and I felt a pang of guilt for being so blunt. But I was tired of protecting everyone else's feelings while mine were trampled. What can I do? She asked through her tears. How can I make this right? I don't know, I admitted. I'm not even sure it can be made right. We can't undo 20 years of this pattern. Diana appeared in the doorway, her face etched with concern. Girls, is everything okay out here? No, I said before Madison could respond. It's not okay. None of this is okay. Diana stepped onto the porch, her maternal instincts clearly warring with her growing understanding of how deeply she had wounded me. Rachel, I know we've made mistakes, she began. Mistakes? I stood up abruptly, my composure finally cracking. Diana, you've spent 17 years treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family. You've prioritized Madison's wants over my needs, dismissed my achievements, and made me feel like I had to earn love while she received it unconditionally. Diana's face went pale. That's not… I never meant… I know you didn't mean to, I said, my voice breaking. But intent doesn't erase impact. Do you know what it's like to be a child and watch your parent figure celebrate your stepsister's B+ while your straight A's are met with? That's nice, dear. I thought you didn't need as much encouragement, Diana said weakly. Every child needs encouragement, I exclaimed. Every child needs to feel like their achievements matter, like they're worthy of celebration and attention and love. I was crying openly now, years of suppressed pain pouring out in an unstoppable flood. I spent my entire childhood and young adulthood trying to earn what Madison got, just for existing. And when I finally succeeded beyond any of your wildest dreams, I hid it from you because I was so convinced that even that wouldn't be enough to make you see me. The three of us stood there, in the aftermath of my outburst, the weight of decades of dysfunction settling around us like dust. I think, I said, wiping my face with my sleeve, I need some space to figure out what I want from this family, if anything. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. And Madison, your Italy program is your responsibility to fund. I'm done enabling the very pattern that's hurt me all these years. With that, I went inside to pack my overnight bag, leaving my fractured family to contemplate the wreckage of relationships built on inequality and sustained by silence. I drove back to Chicago in a haze of emotional exhaustion, my phone buzzing constantly with calls and texts from my family that I wasn't ready to answer. By the time I reached my downtown condo, it was nearly midnight, and the city lights blurred together through my tear-stained windshield. Emma was waiting in my lobby, having somehow convinced the night security guard to let her up. She took one look at my face and wordlessly handed me a cup of coffee from the 24-hour place down the street. That bad? She asked as we rode the elevator up to my floor. Worse, I managed. But maybe also better. I honestly don't know anymore. Once inside my apartment, I collapsed onto my couch and told Emma everything. The canceled birthday dinner, the phone call that exposed my secret, the painful confrontations that followed. She listened without interruption, occasionally wincing at the more brutal parts. So you cut off funding for Madison's Italy program? She asked when I finished. I did, and I told them I needed space to figure out what I want from this family. Emma was quiet for a long moment. How do you feel about that decision? Scared, I admitted, and guilty, and relieved, and angry that I feel guilty about finally setting a boundary. Rachel, you realize this is huge, right? You've been enabling their dysfunction for years. and now you finally stopped. That takes incredible courage." "It doesn't feel courageous. It feels like I just nuked my family." "Maybe," Emma said gently. "Or maybe you just forced them to look at who they've been and who they want to become." Over the next week, the fallout was immediate and complicated. My father called daily, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Diana sent long, rambling emails that alternated between defensiveness and apology. But it was Madison's response that surprised me most. She didn't call or text begging for money. Instead, she showed up at my office on Thursday afternoon, having taken a bus from Millbrook to Chicago, a 6-hour journey she had never made before. Emma buzzed my office. "Your stepsister is here. She looks determined." I considered having Emma send her away, but curiosity won out. "Send her in." Madison entered my office, looking nothing like the polished yoga instructor I was used to seeing. Her hair was in a messy bun, she wore jeans and a wrinkled sweater, and she carried a worn backpack that looked like it had seen better days. "Wow," she said, looking around at my corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. "This is really your life." "What are you doing here, Madison?" She sat down in the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking nervous. "I came to ask you something, and I want you to know that I'll accept whatever answer you give me." I waited. "I want to know if you'd consider giving me a job, not funding my Italy program, not paying my way through life, a real job where I have to earn my place and prove myself." I stared at her, speechless. This was the last thing I had expected. "I know I don't deserve it," she continued quickly. "I know I've been spoiled and entitled and cruel to you. But Rachel, I'm 26 years old, and I've never actually accomplished anything on my own. Everything I've done has been funded or facilitated by other people, mostly you." She took a shaky breath. "I applied for a student loan to cover the Italy program. I'll probably get it, but the debt will be mine to manage. And I've been thinking that maybe I need to learn what it feels like to actually work for something." "Madison, you can't just show up here and—" "I'm not asking for special treatment," she interrupted. "I'm asking for the chance to start over, to be the sister you deserved instead of the one you got." There was something different about her, a gravity I'd never seen before. Gone was the bubbly confidence that had always annoyed me. In its place was a vulnerability that seemed genuine. "What kind of job are you talking about?" I found myself asking. "Anything. I'll answer phones, file papers, get coffee. I don't care. I just want to understand what you've built and maybe learn how to build something myself." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or entitlement. But all I saw was exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. "The entry-level marketing assistant position pays $35,000 a year," I said slowly. "You'd be living on that salary with no supplements from me or our parents. Can you handle that?" "I've been researching apartments," she said, pulling out her phone. "There are some studios I can afford if I get a roommate. And I've been looking at community college courses for business skills." The transformation was so dramatic that I almost didn't believe it was real. "Why?" I asked. "Why now? Why this?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. "Because for the first time in my life, I saw what my selfishness actually costs someone I love. Because I realized that I've been a parasite, living off other people's generosity while contributing nothing of value. Because I want to be worthy of the sister who paid for my education and my engagement party and asked for nothing in return." Her voice broke on the last words, and I felt my own eyes filling with tears. "And because I want to understand you," she continued. "I want to know what it feels like to work 18-hour days and build something from nothing. I want to know what kind of strength it took to succeed, despite being ignored and overlooked by the people who should have been cheering you on. I sat back in my chair, processing her words. This conversation was happening in my office, where I was the boss, where I held all the power. But somehow Madison seemed more mature in this moment than I had ever seen her. "There would be conditions," I said finally. She nodded eagerly. "Anything. You'd report to Emma, not to me. I won't show you any favoritism, and I won't protect you if you don't perform. You'd be treated exactly like any other employee." "I understand. And if this is some kind of manipulation, if you're just trying to get close to the money again, I will fire you immediately and cut all contact with our family permanently. Rachel, I swear to you, this isn't about money. This is about trying to become someone worthy of your respect." I looked at my stepsister, really looked at her, and saw something I had never seen before: humility. The entitled princess, who had always expected the world to revolve around her, was gone, replaced by a young woman who seemed genuinely committed to change. "The position starts Monday," I said. "Emma will give you the details." Madison's face lit up with a smile that was different from her usual bright grin. Smaller, more genuine, tinged with relief and determination. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down." "We'll see," I said, but for the first time in years, I found myself hoping she was right. After Madison left, Emma came into my office with raised eyebrows. "Well, that was unexpected," she said. "Do you think I'm making a mistake?" Emma considered the question seriously. "Maybe. But Rachel, in all the years I've known you, you've never been wrong about reading people's true intentions. If your gut says she's genuine, then maybe she is." That evening, I finally returned my father's calls. He picked up on the first ring. "Rachel, thank God. I was starting to think you'd cut us off completely. I hired Madison," I said without preamble. There was a long silence. "You... what?" "She came to Chicago and asked for a job. A real job, with real responsibilities and real consequences. She starts Monday." "I don't understand." "She was devastated about the Italy program being canceled. Diana's been crying for days." "The Italy program isn't canceled," I corrected. "Madison applied for student loans to fund it herself. But she's decided to postpone it to work for me instead." Another silence. "She chose to postpone Italy? For a job? Apparently she wants to learn what it feels like to earn something on her own merit." I could hear the shock in my father's voice. "Rachel, I don't know what you said to her last week, but it changed something fundamental. She's been different since you left. Quieter, more thoughtful. Diana's been worried that she was depressed." "Maybe she's just growing up," I suggested. "Maybe. Or maybe seeing herself through your eyes finally showed her who she had become." We talked for another hour, and while the conversation was still tentative and careful, there was something different about it. For the first time in years, my father asked specific questions about my work, my life, my plans. He listened to my answers without immediately redirecting the conversation to Madison. It was a small start, but it felt like progress. As I went to bed that night, I wondered if Madison would actually follow through on her promise to change. Part of me expected her to quit within a week, when she realized how different my world was from the sheltered existence she'd always known. But another part of me, the part that had always believed in second chances despite being hurt so many times, hoped that maybe, finally, we could begin to build something real between us. 6 months later, I stood in my office, watching Madison through the glass conference room walls, as she presented a marketing proposal to our client services team. She wore a simple black blazer and spoke with quiet confidence, her presentation slides displaying data she had researched and compiled herself. The transformation had been gradual but undeniable. The first month was rough, Madison struggled with the early hours, the demanding pace, and the reality that no one was going to coddle her or make exceptions for her comfort. She made mistakes, missed deadlines, and I watched Emma have several stern conversations with her about professional standards. But she didn't quit. When other entry-level employees went out for drinks after work, Madison stayed late to catch up on projects. When she didn't understand something, she asked questions and took notes instead of expecting someone else to figure it out for her. Most surprisingly, she never once mentioned our family relationship to gain favor with colleagues. "She's actually pretty good at this," Emma had said after Madison's third-month evaluation. Her social media strategy for the Henderson account increased their engagement by 40%. "You sound surprised," I had replied. "I am surprised. I thought she'd wash out in 2 weeks. But Rachel, she's working harder than some people who've been here for years." Now, watching Madison field questions from the team with competence and professionalism, I felt something I hadn't experienced in our relationship before: genuine pride in her accomplishments. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Dinner tonight at Romano's. My treat. I have something I want to discuss with you." Romano's was the restaurant where my birthday dinner had been canceled all those months ago. I texted back, "See you at 7. The family dynamics had been slowly shifting over the past 6 months. Diana had started therapy after our confrontation, working through her patterns of favoritism and the guilt she felt about my childhood. My father had been making deliberate efforts to ask about my life, my work, and my feelings, rather than just accepting surface-level responses. But it was Madison's transformation that had created the most significant change. Her decision to work for me had forced everyone to confront the reality of who she had been and who she was becoming. I arrived at Romano's to find my father already seated at a corner table, looking nervous but determined. He stood when he saw me, giving me a hug that felt more natural than our interactions had in years. "You look good, kiddo," he said as we sat down. "Successful." I smiled. "I look the same as always, Dad." "No, you don't. You look lighter somehow, less guarded." He wasn't wrong. The constant stress of maintaining 2 separate identities was gone. My family now knew who I was professionally, and while our relationships were still healing, there was a relief in not having to hide my success anymore. "So what did you want to discuss?" I asked after we had ordered. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this, and to tell you something I should have said months ago." I opened the envelope to find a check for $50,000. "Dad, what is this?" "It's every penny we can account for that you spent on us over the years," he said. "The roof, Madison's tuition, Diana's medical bills, the engagement party. We took out a second mortgage on the house to repay you." I stared at the check, shocked. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did. Rachel, we took advantage of your generosity for years. We let you fund our lives while treating you like an afterthought. That's not love. That's exploitation." His words hit me harder than I expected. "I gave that money willingly, because you were desperate for our attention and approval," he said gently. "And we let you buy your way into consideration instead of giving you the love and respect you deserved simply for being our daughter." I felt tears starting to form. "Dad, I know you probably don't need this money," he continued, "but we need to give it back. We need to start fresh, with relationships built on genuine care rather than financial dependency." I looked at the check again, understanding the sacrifice it represented. A second mortgage at their age, with my father's modest retirement income, would be a significant financial burden. "The house payments will be tight," I said. "We'll manage. Your mother is talking about going back to substitute teaching to help with the expenses. And Madison is insisting on paying rent, now that she has a steady income." The gesture was deeply meaningful, but I couldn't accept it, knowing the hardship it would cause them. "I appreciate this more than you know," I said, folding the check. "But I can't take it." His face fell. "Rachel, please, we need to do this." "What you need to do is trust me when I say the money was a gift," I replied. "But what I need is for you to stop treating me like I'm less important than Madison. I need you to remember my birthday, to ask about my life, to show interest in my achievements." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't want your money, Dad. I want your attention, your respect, your genuine interest in who I am." He squeezed my hand, tears in his eyes. "You have all of that, Rachel. You've always had it. I just did a terrible job of showing it." Over dinner, he told me about the changes at home. Diana was working hard to recognize and change her patterns of favoritism. She had started reaching out to me independently, sending articles about tech industry trends and asking thoughtful questions about my work. "And Madison," he said with wonder in his voice, "she's like a different person. She comes home exhausted from work, but excited about projects she's working on. She talks about you with such admiration, not just for giving her a chance, but for the leader you are. She's earned her place on the team," I said honestly. "I'm not doing her any favors at this point. She's genuinely good at her job." "She told us about the promotion," he said with pride. "Marketing coordinator, right? With a real salary increase?" I nodded. Madison had been promoted the previous month, after consistently exceeding expectations and showing genuine leadership potential. "She also told us she's planning to enroll in night school for her MBA," he continued. "Says she wants to understand business the way you do." The conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing. Madison's name appeared on the screen. "Sorry, this might be work-related," I said, answering the call. "Rachel, I'm so sorry to bother you during dinner." Madison's voice came through clearly. "But the Peterson client just called with an emergency. Their system crashed, and they need the backup protocol implemented immediately. I know I'm not authorized for that level of access, but I didn't want to wait until Monday if there was something I could do." I smiled at my father, impressed by Madison's initiative and professionalism. "Walk me through what they're describing," I said. For the next 10 minutes, I guided Madison through the emergency protocol while my father listened with fascination. When the crisis was resolved, Madison thanked me profusely. "You handled that perfectly," I told her. "Send me a summary email tonight and we'll discuss expanding your system access permissions on Monday." "Really?" "Rachel, thank you so much. I know you're having dinner with Dad, so tell him I said hi." After I hung up, my father shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, Madison wouldn't have known how to handle her own Netflix password, and now she's managing emergency client situations. "She's worked hard for it," I said. "Harder than I expected, honestly." "It's more than that," he replied. "She's trying to be worthy of you. Of the sister who never gave up on family, even when family gave up on her." As we prepared to leave the restaurant, my father pulled me into a proper hug. "I know I can't undo the past," he said quietly. "But Rachel, I want you to know that you are not just our daughter. You're our pride and joy. What you've accomplished, who you've become, the grace you've shown us even when we didn't deserve it. I couldn't be prouder." The words I had waited 30 years to hear finally came, and they felt like a balm on wounds I had carried for far too long. 3 months later, I found myself back in Millbrook for a very different kind of family gathering. It was Madison's birthday, her 27th, and for the first time in our family's history, we were celebrating both sisters equally. Diana had planned the evening carefully, making sure to acknowledge both Madison's recent promotion to senior marketing coordinator and my company's expansion into the European market. The dinner conversation flowed naturally between both our achievements, with genuine interest and pride expressed for each of us. Madison looked different too, more confident, but also more grounded. Success she had earned herself suited her better than the effortless privilege she had been given before. "I have an announcement," she said, as we finished our main course. I've been accepted into Northwestern's executive MBA program. The table erupted in congratulations, and I felt genuine happiness for her achievement. And, she continued, looking directly at me, I want you all to know that I'm paying for it myself. Between my salary, student loans, and the scholarship I applied for, I can cover the full cost. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I realized this was what personal accomplishment looked like on her, quieter than her old enthusiasm, but infinitely more meaningful. After dinner, Madison and I found ourselves alone on the back porch, where we'd had our confrontation months earlier. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Do you forgive me, really forgive me, not just say it to keep peace in the family?" I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness had been a process, not a moment. Watching her struggle through her first months at Streamline Sync, seeing her take responsibility for her own education and expenses, witnessing her genuine efforts to change, it had all contributed to a gradual softening of my anger. "I do forgive you," I said finally, "but more importantly, I respect you. The person you've become over the past year is someone I genuinely enjoy spending time with." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "That might be the best compliment you could give me. You've earned it." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of Diana and my father cleaning up inside, their voices warm and content in a way that felt different from before. "Rachel," Madison said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for seeing the potential for something better, even when we couldn't see it ourselves." I looked at my stepsister, who had truly become my sister through her own efforts and growth, and felt something I had never expected to feel: contentment with my family. "Thank you for becoming someone worth not giving up on," I replied. The journey of healing was far from over, but sitting there with Madison, knowing that Diana was in therapy and my father was making genuine efforts to change, I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood: hope for what our family could become. The girl who had once canceled birthday dinners to fund her adventures was gone, replaced by a woman who had learned the value of earning her own way. The parents who had once overlooked their stepdaughter's achievements were learning to see and celebrate both their daughters equally. And me? I was no longer the invisible daughter, hiding her success and funding her own exclusion. I was Rachel Thompson, CEO of Streamline Sync, beloved daughter and sister, finally seen and valued for exactly who I was. Sometimes the most profound changes come not from grand gestures, but from the slow, careful work of people committed to becoming better than they were. Our family had done that work, and while we weren't perfect, we were real. Finally, genuinely real with each other, and that was worth more than all the private jets and business deals in the world.